Good morning, colleagues. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world you're actually joining this conversation. My name is Tobi Oshodi. I teach at Lagos State University in Nigeria, and I'm happy that you're joining this panel on Chinese environmental footprint in Africa. I have with me on the panel Dr. Sule Ibrahim. He will be talking, shortly. But just quickly, the session itself will be in 4 main parts. The first part would be the part that Dr. Sule just has 2 to 4 minutes to give us the main argument of his paper, and also respond to 2 questions I sent to him earlier. The second part would be myself almost swapping position from the chair to the one of the presenters, where I also do the same thing like Sule, talk for like 2 to 4 minutes about the central argument of my paper and also respond to the question. Then the third part would actually be the conversation with other members of the audience, where you can actually jump into the conversation, ask questions, just provide your own intervention, whatever it may be. Then finally we close, hopefully after having a very useful back and forth discussion on our subjects. So without wasting much of our time, I'll just hand over the mic to Dr. Sule Ibrahim to briefly introduce himself and also proceed, to give us the summary of his argument and respond to the 2 questions. If there's any need for me to ask the question, you can just prompt me. I'll do that. You have the floor, Dr. Sule.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tobi. Is it okay? Can I share my slides? I just project the title page. Is that possible? If it's not, I can go on.
Oh, I think it's just better you just go on, because the video is already there, and I assume all our audience would have seen that already. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, and then welcome to everybody. As Dr. Tobi introduced, my name is Sule Ibrahim, and I work with the Confluent Research Network West Africa, and I'm in the Accra office. And this presentation, I'm looking at what I title as Infrastructure in Bauxite Out, where I'm looking at Ghana quest for trying to bridge the development and its infrastructure gap, leads it into contracting loans that requires the use resources to back up those loans and then use to construct the projects. So I'm doing this analysis using the recent agreement that we signed in 2018 with Chinese company to construct roads in exchange for mining bauxite from the Etiwa Heritage Forest, which is in one of the regions in the country called Eastern Region. So basically, I do my assessment, and then I come to conclusion that there are other issues that Ghana need to take into account in terms of intergenerational equity in a natural resource wealth enjoyment, and also in terms of the projects that are going to be handed over to future generation. And my conclusion also comes to the fact that Ghana and China may need to work together to find out how public expectation with this concept in mind, they actually handle strategically so that it can improve their relation. Because if they don't handle public expectation and feelings respect to where Ghana relates in building this kind of agreement, it can undermine Ghana and China relation going forward. So basically, that's what my paper is all about. And in order to stay within the time, I'm not sure, am I within the 2 minutes time rate, the chair?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So basically, as I said, that's the gist of my work, and I believe colleagues have gone through it. So I think I'll stop here. When the questions come, we can address some of the issues that our audience may raise along the line. Thanks so much, and then I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Sule. But let's just go straight into the question, and I think I already shared them with you.
Yes.
If you look at Ghana now, and I think that would also be part of my own presentation. If you look at Ghana now, Ghana is in the situation, even before COVID, the economy actually needed support.
Yes.
Today, as we speak, Ghana is actually meeting with the IMF, if I'm not wrong. So yes. Looking at within that context, do you think, there's really an alternative to, the master mega project support agreement, is there an alternative given this reality? Then I would ask the second question, or maybe I should just follow up with the second question so that you can just answer them. Yes. The idea of the very idea of resource for infrastructure is not new. In fact, some scholars, I think Corkin and the rest of them actually talked about the Angolan model. It was actually almost popularized in Angola, where, Angola gave its oil and it led to, fantastic, if I'm allowed to use that word, infrastructural provision. It's not new, but of course, it has also been criticized. The criticism has actually had two main outcomes. One, it led to a reversal of those kind of, resource for infrastructure agreement. The other outcome is that no, it continues. It won't happen. What do you think is the future of the Ghanaian case? Do you think, for instance, like in Nigeria, where we had the oil for infrastructure deal, for instance, a different government came and that deal was actually cancelled. In fact, it was shocking for the Chinese. And I think it was at that point that China also understood the oscillation of Nigeria-China relations. They were shocked, but the deal was actually cancelled. So, but in Angola, it was not the case. So I'm just trying to, if you have a crystal ball, what do you think is the future, of this deal itself?
Okay. Yes, thank you. And I think I'll take the first question, and then you rightly mentioned IMF as having dispatched their team to Ghana upon the request of the Ghanaian authority to assist to recover from some of the shocks and coming from COVID-19 and the Russian crisis, and also homegrown problems that have necessitated some of these issues. You rightly mentioned that. But if you look at the projects that been invested in this presentation, the master plan in terms of the infrastructure, if you look at the projects like feeder roads, district hospitals, and police station, you wonder whether Ghana necessarily need to enter into agreement with a foreign partner to build this kind of infrastructure. Feeder roads, I mean, these are not infrastructure that you say a government cannot provide for its own citizens. It's not a mega projects that any government will want to provide that it cannot provide. Feeder roads, district hospitals, markets, police stations. It's not a mega project. So you find it difficult to understand why government cannot raise revenue internally to take care of these smaller projects and then engage China or other developmental partners in projects that can generate revenue for themselves. If you invest in larger projects, whereby those projects become the collateral, so that the investment made into those projects then produce revenues or resources that are used to finance or pay back the loans that you take. That's one key area that many people are thinking about, and that's the key area that the government will need to pay attention to, so that you're able to know, okay, the mega project that we don't have huge revenue to take, or huge skills or huge expertise to undertake. You can engage with your developmental partners to undertake that project. But projects smaller, like market shelves, hospital, district hospital, police stations, and feeder roads, you should be able to raise revenue from internal to undertake care of those things. And the problem is, it's not that the government cannot raise revenue internally, it's how they manage internally generated revenue. That's where the problem is. So you go in for Chinese loan or China loan to come and construct feeder roads. In 2 or 3 years' time after the project, 5 years' time, those projects will go back to waste. So at the end of the day, you build up a project that is not able to finance itself and it's not able to sustain. So 5 or 6 years, another government can, then you have to contract another loan to build up those, to reconstruct those roads. And then the process continues and continues. Meanwhile, the future generation share in the natural resources is being collateralized. No one is saying that current generation should not enjoy their fair share of the natural resource world. But you should do so having in mind the future generation. As long as they'll be born in Ghana, they also should have some fair share to those resources. So that is what we're talking about, sustainable governance of natural resources. Enjoy yours, but then leave some of the world for future generations. So if you're investing in projects, then invest in projects that will last, that have the lifespan is a little bit longer for them, not in a project that future generation are losing their share in the resources, but then they will have to find another money to pay for the reconstruction of those projects because their lifespan is so short. That's where the arguments are being raised. And I think the alternative way strictly is to invest in projects that can be productive enough for themselves to pay back for those loans that have been taken. That's the core dimension, the core element of mortgage financing. The project in which you invest in it should be able to pay for itself, should be the collateral and should be able to pay for itself. And then we can then move forward. So if I'm moving from there to the next question about the future of these deals, I think Ghana was a little bit strategic this time around. They decided to take it to the lawmakers to pass into a law. So if the deal becomes a law, and then it's difficult for any government to say they will not continue to finance it. If it were to be a government policy, the next government or change of government, the subsequent government may say it's not this policy, it's not going to finance it. And we've seen some of those cases where government projects stall at a certain stage and stand there for years because the government that initiated left office, the next one that came in also has its own priority projects, and abandoned those projects despite the investment that have been sunk into them. So we have had that crisis, and we continue to have those crises. But with respect to this deal, it was taken to the parliament legislated it, so it becomes a law. If another government wants to abandon, then you have to go to the same parliament to repeal it. If there's no, even in repealing it, China has already started working. So that creates another problem. China can take Ghana to international court and judgment will be passed, and China will have to be paid for whatever work it has done and to whatever stage. So the dilemma is huge. If the future government says that, oh, these projects are not beneficial for Ghana, then you have to pay China to exit from its investment or its participation in those projects. And that also creates another national crisis, that discussions will begin to divide society along the lines of those who may see China, because one of the arguments that came earlier when this deal was about to be initiated was the fact that the possibility that there's going to be judgment debts in the future, or the possibility that certain government will not continue the project is high. And if you not continue, once China starts, then you have to pay them. So you have to find money to pay China to exit. So in finding money to pay China, either you are going to find the money from the same Etua forest or from taxpayers, or going to borrow or take a loan from somewhere. That's also another crisis. So already there's a problem we're trying to solve, and then we create another problem. And that problem will have to be addressed by future generations. So that is why, in my argument, I insist often that China and Ghana will have to take equal responsibility for this project, so that if China is participating in equally, if it will ensure that the project do not fail, because its interest is high. So if China is only going to supply the money, or going to supply the projects, and Ghana supplies the money, then it will go ahead and construct the projects with whatever money the banks, the guarantor banks will provide, and will construct waiting for its payment. So 5 years time payment doesn't come, it goes to court arbitration or negotiation, whatever, and we have to pay for it. Other the projects where they've gotten to, Ghana can continue to maintain them or upgrade them or whatever. That is not the problem with China. So that's where the problem, that the interest of China and interest of Ghana in ensuring that these projects materialize is missing in these projects. It's only in the interest of Ghana that this project must materialize. And that in that interest, it's also going to be undermined by the political workings within the country. If one party lives in government, the government that initiated, if it leaves today, the next one, the possibility that it might not continue side. And if it's not going to continue, then you have to pay China to exit. And that's another one that we have to go and then borrow whatever. So the sustainability in that is very dicey in that dimension in terms of future sustainability of the progress. Yes.
Thank you so much, Sule, for your response. And your response is actually, I'm almost tempted to ask a third question, but I
Yes.
won't do that. About, within what context was the agreement itself signed? What were the
Okay.
opposition saying, the
Yeah.
media, the non-state actors, the civil society groups,
Yeah.
within Ghana and even in China. So, but I'll leave that for another time. Let me just
Okay.
swap my position to
Mm.
talk briefly about my own paper.
Research.
So
Yes.
maybe Sule, you can actually change, you assume the position of the chair while I just present my paper.
That's
So
great. That's fine. Yeah.
the central idea of my paper, which essentially is actually a work in progress. It's actually almost a preliminary reflection about the research that I'll be starting full time from August till next year. And the idea is begin to reflect about, the engagement of China beyond the states. And to look at that within the context of 2 points, two critical points, points. The first is actually the point of exit. The second is actually the point of engagement. The point of engagement is actually the fact that we want to engage with you critically, draw your attention to negatives, not only the positive. But the point of exit is one that actually wants to look the other way when certain negative are actually taking place. And I earlier, it's still a kind of frame that I'm still trying to work with, but I already published a book chapter about what I'm talking about. And I argue that the point of exit is actually where the states are. It is not as if the Ghanaian states don't understand the environmental, implication of some of these policies, for instance. That is not the reality. But the reality is actually, indirectly linked to the question that I asked, that many African states are actually in the situation where they need Chinese from. They need continuous Chinese development funding, finance. They need it. And it is even, the article itself, the book chapter was written in 2015. But today, the case is even more precarious, because we didn't have COVID at that time, but we have a situation where many of the African countries have been faced with serious economic, crisis. And of course, they may not even have the luxury of saying no to many of the things that China will bring on the table. So, and it is within that context that I now began to reflect about the role of, beyond the state, the role of non-state actors. What are the non-state actors doing? And the literature increasingly seems to be suggesting that when the state is actually exiting, certain non-state actors are actually engaging, and they are getting, their voices, heard wide and loud. And the example is actually, the Stone Boy rendition that I actually discussed for my presentation, where one of Ghana's biggest superstar decided to talk about environmental issues broadly. But if you look at the video, he was, not in doubt. He did not put anybody in doubt as to what he was trying to say. And I talked about the 6 legs. Of the 6 legs, the Chinese leg was actually the most, audible, where he was not only showing where, the Chinese businessman is actually paying and getting the gold, but also the local network that allows that to happen. But I also concluded that music is, a very powerful tool, but it can also be reductionistic. It can be reductionistic in the sense that you can't discuss the whole gamut of Chinese environmental footprint within 4 minutes, 10 seconds, which is what Greedy Men, Stone Boys Greedy Men actually did. And I actually mentioned that there are actually other dimensions of Chinese environmental footprint, positive dimension of that. And I talked about the solar energy, for instance, where China is leading, Chinese companies are actually leading in providing that alternative energy, where, for instance, the new university for energy, environmental, the new university, China is actually supporting them with energy saving items. So, but music cannot actually capture that. And because the paper itself is actually a work in progress, I've not conducted any interview. It is just based on the analysis of the rendition as I listened to it. But because I was wondering that why, the musician may be able to sing well, but it may actually be the producer, the director that is actually, introducing those very powerful imageries about, the connection of China and how that fits into the broader narrative of China's environmental footprint on the continent. I think I will stop there because I know virtually all our audience probably would have seen the video, and I'll just wait for your questions, Dr. Sully.
Okay, thanks so much. And let me just also go straight so that we can stay within the time frame. And I have two questions, but there's sub questions to it. So I'll send you the two first, and after that we will see the time, and then we can manage those two sub questions. The first question I'm looking at, basically, if I say, to what extent will you agree or disagree with the view that local government, not national government per se, can grant China permission or Chinese state permission to mine gold in their localities? That's some of the arguments that we're working around here, whether the local government themselves, not the national state, to take the responsibility in granting China those permission. But I'm also doing this, right? You're taking into the context that the China relational engagement is mostly with state authorities there, the national government. So in that discussion, so you reflect a little bit on that, then we see. And the next one is that given that China is not the only foreign country that engages Ghana at the local or the subnational level, what will you say is the reason that there is a popular endorsement for stone bones, greedy men within the population, as evidence in the number of social media views and then the VMG Nobel Award to him? What is explaining this, that majority of the population seems to be endorsing Stone Boy's perspective? These are the key two questions. Not the response, we can always discuss the other matter that arises. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suli. And I think I'll just start. The two questions are very important questions, but very difficult, but I'll try to start from the simplest one, simplest in quote, which is the fact that, okay, why was the music itself endorsed? Why was, that's all those news review reportage around the news? I can think of many reasons. I can talk about 5 reasons. The first is actually, which is the clearest, is the fact that Ghanaians understand the negative implication of galamsey. The environment is being polluted, and so when you have, and that's the second point, when you have a superstar, like Stone Boy, whenever I'm in Ghana, there is no time I won't, listen to some of his music on the TV, watching the TV, his music will be played, himself, Sarkodie, Shatawale, those are the 3 leading musicians. So when you have a Stone Boy talking about environmental issues, it would definitely get certain attention. Then globally too, it's not a Ghanaian problem. People are increasingly, countries, communities are increasingly being conscious about the environment, whether it is in Ghana or outside of Ghana. So I'm not surprised that he's getting, reviews even outside of Ghana because of what he decided to do. Then why won't he get endorsement? Music, is not, music is not independent. Music can be very political. If you, I mentioned Sarkodie before the current president, before the current president's second election, Sarkodie sang Happy Day, and you can go online and see the number of people, that actually listen to that and what people said about that. And today, as we speak, given the context in the Ghanaian system, he is also in the studio, and people are actually excited about what he's going to say, whether he's still going to criticize, whether he's still going to support Nana Akufo-Addo's government, or he's going to be very critical. Fingers crossed about about that. Oh, so sorry, I was trying to read the chat. So it's music is political, and it would always get endorsement, whether it is from the opposition, that would hype the music and use it, instrumentalize it for their own campaign, or the ruling party that will criticize it. But in the case of Stonebwoy, even the lands minister supported it because he saw it as a kind of agenda that keyed into his goal of fighting illegal gold mining. And I think I'll just leave it at that. Then to your second question, which is also very brilliant, but it's also tricky because when we talk about permission, there are many ways of looking at permission. We can look at it from the point that you talked about, the state's permission, where we formalize, permission, documented permission. But if you reflect within the context of the work of people like Egosa Osage, for instance, that was talking about exiting from the state, that you are, that Africans are actually exiting from the state. So when you have a context where there is that exit, where people do their things, if the government is not providing power, you have your generating set. If the government is not providing water, you have your bowl. If the security is terrible, you have your security, your own private security, you fence it, and all those things. So when you have those kind of context, permission is not necessarily statist. You can actually have non-state actors granting those permissions. If we start with the music itself, permission within the context of Stonebwoy's rendition was actually given by the chief. It was the chief, the local chief, that was actually handing out, signing the agreement on behalf of his people. And why the, if we have two types of permission, the tick and the tin. The tin is the statist one that is restricted to the formal state. But the tick one is one that actually encapsulates both the failure of the state as well as the other non-state actors granting permission. What it means is that without the community supporting, it would have been difficult for the Chinese businessman to drive his jeep, go into the community, almost without escort and not being harassed. So permission within that context may not necessarily be a national. In fact, I'm inclined to believe that permission at that level is more at the level of the community than the state. Because if you look at the concept, the idea of galamsey itself, it is something that is done illegally. And that is also another challenge with Stonebwoy's rendition itself, because he also, compounds, and almost in a reductionist way assumes Chinese is China, meaning that whatever Chinese, citizens do, then China is doing it. And that is problematic. He was talking about the Chinese state, giving permission to the Chinese state. But the man that was driving the Jeep, yes, he had this Chinese flag, but he may not necessarily represent the Chinese state. Although there was the symbolism about Sino-Hydro, the company that actually you talked about, Sino-Hydro. If you see, there were so many instances where he painted the picture of, the jerry can, the net, the barbed wire, depicting Sino-Hydro. But at the same time, he was talking about galamsey. Sino-Hydro is doing something that is formalized, like you just educated us, something that is backed by government agreement. Let me just stop because I can see the time. It's already running to 35. So we can just close, wait for our other colleagues in the audience to actually give us their feedback that we honestly think. So let me swap.
So you take your position. Take your position now.
Thank you. So thank you so much again. Yeah. Thank you so much again for joining our session. And please, the floor is open now for your feedback, to support our paper. And I can see Uma already. Please, you can unmute yourself. Thank you.
Yes. Hi. So I had a question which has interested me for a while. This thing about Chinese investment in Africa. Now, you asked the question whether Africa, or you were asking whether Ghana can do without Chinese investment. I guess one of the questions that's worth thinking about on the environmental context is, are Chinese companies, one, doing better than African companies on the environmental front? That's one question. Are Chinese companies doing better in Africa than they do in their own country? So here, what I'm trying to get at is the Chinese experience of environmentalism is not great even in China. So in a sense, are you asking too much if you're saying that Chinese companies should be responsible in Africa, when in China itself, their experience has not been great? And the reason I ask that question is to try and unpack whether it is a lack of ability and technical resources, or a lack of willingness to engage with the environmental agenda, in particular to engage with it in Africa. So going back to this notion that, well, it's not my backyard, so I don't have to worry about it. And third, maybe a comparison of other countries' investment in Africa on environmental grounds again, and whether that is better or worse than the Chinese one. So for instance, take Indian or take Western investments in Africa, and are they actually environmentally better than Chinese, or are they not? Thank you. We can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Oh, thank you so much for that question. It's really brilliant. So that we maximize, the opportunity. Can other people ask their questions so that we can have all those questions, then respond to them at once? Please, if you have any question, you can just indicate, please.
Maybe while you wait for the question, you can also be answering one while you wait for the question. If anybody lifts their hand, then time is quite short for us.
That's true. I think, Uma, you've actually raised a fundamental question. That there's a saying in Yoruba that somebody that will clutch you. You look at the person's appearance first. Whether that person is doing well on. And when you asked that question, I was actually thinking about a documentary that I saw about Shanghai, the weather itself already showing that how polluted the environment, the air being, inhaled was like. So when you have a context like that, it, speaks to your question that how can such society actually give, that is one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that China is also, as a country, struggling, with its own environmental situation. And today, as we speak, China is leading, is one of the leaders, in the production of alternative solar energy, for instance, that I talked about. So in that sense, African countries may actually learn more from China within that context than, many other countries, including the countries in the West. I don't know. I'm looking at Sule now, or anybody in the audience. In Ghana, for instance, I think Chinese companies are actually investing more in solar technology than any of the other countries, whether it is the European countries put together, whether it is the US. I think China is doing more than any of those countries. So in that sense, we can learn from them. But one other thing I was actually thinking you wanted to hammer on, was the idea of the agency. How do Africans see, these things, what Chinese, businesses do. And you talked about whether the Chinese business is also different from the local or, businesses. What do they do differently? Are they better than the local businesses?
Yeah.
Well, that's a tricky question. Tricky in the sense that there are certain Chinese companies that don't even have any competition because of the level of state support, the level of investment they have. You can't compete with them. For instance, take for instance, you want to have a local business in Nigeria, for instance, to compete with CCECC. CCECC is the Chinese multinational in construction. We don't have any local. The alternative we have is Julius Berger, which is a German, construction firm. But CCCC is now even dominating the market and almost kicking out Julius Berger from the Nigerian market. So in certain cases, there is no basis for competition. But why it's also a little bit complicated to talk in that binary terms is that some of the Chinese companies are also getting into this local content, where there is a partnership. You have a Chinese company, but there is a partnership. In fact, some countries are actually putting that in the agreement. Nigeria, for instance, there's a local content policy where you're coming in, but you need to partner with certain local. So within that context, it is the Chinese company as well as the local company that should be held liable. But coming back to my presentation, Galamsey itself is not the typical business. It is almost like, it's something that the law does not permit, really, polluting the environment and destroying the environment, no. But you still, in spite of that, you still have people doing it, So what that says is, but let me just skip and see if Sule wants to say something.
Yeah, just one question came in, and I want, maybe if you have taken note of that, given the time, and that question about how does one exit from the state, but then coming to the Galamsey thing. Galamsey is restricting an illegal business, so whoever engages in it is doing something that is affront to the law. But the point is, because the state is not present at every point in the lives of the people get engaged in these kind of things and get away with it. And because they get away with it, if you look at the narratives and public discourse, it's like the Chinese investors have studied that, and they take advantage to join the people in that dimension. So the local people are in front, you see them, but behind, those who provide the investment, other resources, logistics, also come from the Chinese system. But the other dimension that talking about non-governmental organization or actors in this sector is to look at the way private Chinese citizens or investors use the name of China state to do business that are illegal. And for that matter, whatever grievance that they generate from that illegality at a society level feeds back to China as a state, because the people see the name of the company as China. So that's the problem. Whatever is doing is done in the name of China. So the local person sees the name as China. So whatever grievance the person has is about China as a state, not China as a private citizens who are doing their private business that are affront to the law. So in doing this kind of discussion, I think we need to also have that reflection, so that when we are appropriating responsibilities and what solutions to come, what China should do, respect to the fact that its good name, the good name it has created over the years, it's been appropriated by its own citizens for private benefits that generate grievances, and that those grievances goes to undermine the Chinese state. So I think if you highlight that dimension, to be great. But I don't know whether Toby is still around or he just.
Yes, let me. I think we need to think about living in the next 2 or 3 minutes there. But I think
so you answered the question
Linda,
for the.
Yes,
yeah.
Linda asked the question: how do you exit from the state?
Yeah.
The idea of exiting from the state is actually located within the context of these social contracts, that the state is responsible to perform certain functions, protect your security, education, cater for the environment, and do many things. In fact, the literature would tell you that the African state is expected to be omnicompetent, meaning that it should be able to solve all problems. But the idea of exiting from the state simply means that the state is now failing in those fundamental responsibilities. For example, security. When the state fails in terms of providing security to its people, people may end up creating their own vigilantes, their own guards. At the end of the day, the guards almost transform into a pseudo state where they do many of the things that the state do. You get to certain communities where it is actually the vigilantes that will control traffic. Some are already taking tax to be able to continue with the process. So it is within that context. So when, individuals exit from the state, it is that idea that, okay, the state has really failed me. I need to begin to think about doing things myself now. I can't rely on the public power supply to, I can't rely on the public school. I can't rely on, those responsibilities that the state in its social contract with the people ordinarily should have addressed. So I'll just stop there.
I think Linda just raised her hand. I don't know if she wanted to say something and be given our time.
Oh, please, Linda, go ahead. Please go ahead.
Mute. Do we have any time? How many minutes have we got left? Can you hear me? Oh.
Yes, we hear you. Can you respond to Toby on mute?
Am I on mute?
Yes, Toby.
No.
Yes.
Yes, so we can hear you clearly.
Yes.
Oh, you can hear me. I've got a comment about Sino-Hydro in Ecuador, because I've done some work on that. And they have actually been involved in sort of unofficial payments. But I think what's interesting, they've been involved in unofficial payments to the political party, I think, of President Rafael Correa when he was in office. But I think what's interesting about Chinese involvement, certainly in Latin America, is that there have been quite a few, there's been a new law passed, I'm not sure if it was this year or last year, but previously sort of Chinese environmental law was much stronger, I think, in China than it was in countries in which China has overseas investment. It has a lot of investment in Ecuador, but I think what's interesting, they have changed the law so that their companies' responsibilities are now much greater in the area of foreign investment. So they do have to comply with, I suppose, corporate social responsibility. I think up till now it's been on sort of narrative level or more in the terms of PR, but I think there are legal mechanisms now for greater responsibility of foreign companies such as Sino-Hydro in presumably in Africa as well as in Latin America. That's just my observation, shall we say.
Thank you so much, Linda. And I think Sule would actually read more about your work on Ecuador, hopefully if it's available, to get a better insight into his own work. So, but I just want to say a big thank you for all of you, including those that actually had to leave the panel. We've gotten useful feedback, and I think going back, myself and Sule would definitely benefit from presenting at this year's DSA, and hopefully in the next future we would have some publications to share about our both works. Thank you so much. And I think I can, yes, thank you for sharing your email. We'll be in touch. Thank you so much, Linda. So Sule, if you want to say anything, you just have like a minute or so.
That is great. I mean, I appreciate the insights as well. And then Linda's last comments and then the email is very helpful. We will definitely stay in touch, and then we have more discussions of some of these issues, and we bring other insights and clarity. Thanks so much, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.